You're listening to the Place Northwest podcast, your digital resource for the latest insight and analysis on all things property in the northwest of England.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Place Northwest podcast. I'm your host, Julia Hatmaker. This episode is brought to you in association with HMS. HMS is an award-winning construction company and contractor operating across the Northwest. Part of the Taurus Group, HMS transforms places and changes lives through reinvesting 100% of its profits into local causes. For more information, visit hmsworks.co.uk. In today's episode, I am joined by HMS's Maintenance Director, Alison Brown, Commercial Director, Ian McGillivary, Construction Director, John Barrow, and Managing Director, Paul Worthington. So, this year marks HMS's 10th birthday. Paul, why don't you tell me a little bit about how the company has changed over the last decade?
Substantially over that period, and because we're 10, it gives you the opportunity to reflect on where we started out over that period. I mean, back in 2011, the whole concept for the business was an opportunity, really, because we'd set up the business after the incumbent contractor for Liverpool had gone into administration. So it was a real opportunity for us to develop, but turnover back then was about 9 million and we had about 180 staff. And you compare that to today, and we're forecasting turnover to be over 80 million with nearly 750 staff. So over that 10 years, just the activities that we do are totally different, very, very diverse, as you can see that the team mentioned then. But a real exciting place to work.
Yeah, and you guys have your hands in a bunch of different pots. You do work with public sector, specialist housing, and just regular residential. Any of those a particular favorite for anyone out there?
I'd probably have to say for me, it's the social housing sector. I've been in it for 30 odd years. It's a unique little marketplace. Wouldn't be necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but I love it.
I think for me, to add to Alison's point, I think for me there is a great diversity, and whilst our base is in social housing, we're using those skills in the housing sector to look at other markets as well. So I think over the time that Paul describes, we have diversified. We're now not just working for our parent company; we're working for lots of external companies. A lot are in the public sector, but increasingly now in the private sector. So you'd look over the 10 years to say we started as a maintenance business and we're increasingly becoming a maintenance and construction business that's grown tremendously.
I mean, the business was born out of Liverpool Mutual Homes. What stock the city had left over was created in 2008, and after the contractor going into administration, it then set HMS up without a big ambition but a real opportunity. But our business plan was split into four really over that 10-year period, where 25% of it or a quarter of it is based on repairs and maintenance, a quarter of it's based on planned maintenance, the next quarter is based on development and construction projects, which is the John's team, and the remaining quarter there is based on third-party activity. Now, when the business was originally set up in 2011, we never envisaged working for anybody else other than for the group in its entirety. But throughout that journey, when we hit about 2015-16, we'd realised there was loads of opportunity, and it kept us honest if we work for other clients in other sectors. And that's where our business model and business plan changed quite substantially about that time.
I think I can add a little bit to that as well in relation to, I've gone full circle. So I actually started off in social housing, then went commercial contracting, and then came back to social housing. But I've seen organisations like HMS, similar organisations, diversify the offering, if you like, and more organisations like ourselves who are part of an umbrella group have moved into developments and new build activity, and you can see that diversification across the board. But HMS have been quite, we've been quite focused in our ambitions to move into different arenas, and we've obviously put the resource and energy into achieving that.
I think that was the driver for growth and diversification, because at the same time the main group has changed and developed over that period. So as we've grown. So again, the merger in 2018 to become Taurus as is now, again gives us real strength. But that whole diversification back in 2016, what was that? Was saying actually that can we start working with other clients? Can we start to use that strength that we've got and the core skills that we've got with others? And that was born out of the whole business model now, where the group's got this: whatever profits we make being a commercial contractor is recycled back into social purpose, back into the communities in which we work. And that's that whole 100% of that's recycled. So that unique premise is very different for most commercial contractors.
So, because you all are so diverse, you have a good chance to look at the industry as a whole. And I know we had talked way before we even did this podcast, about the current skills shortage. So, I just wanted to pick y'all's brain a little bit. What is the current state of the talent pool, in your opinion?
I think it's different across the different work stream areas, isn't it? So and probably John will pick up, it's different from John to perhaps the commercial side that Ian does. For my side of things, which is the maintenance side, I think at the moment, in terms of our organisation, we've been around for, as Paul was saying, 10 years. And prior to that, some of the people that have worked with us have worked in this industry kind of since they were little folk. So it's an aging population or an aging workforce in my area. And I think that's one of the things that we're facing, both aging and people wanting to come into the maintenance sector, because the maintenance sector is different from construction. And you often say that just on the practical side, fitting a brand new door in a nice new square hole is very different from rehanging a door in a property that's however many years old. And so definitely aging workforce is one of the issues for me.
Well, I think that's mirrored across the sector, and I mean, I won't be as alarmist to say, like it's at crisis point, but it's certainly, I mean, the CITB have been discussing that for years, but everybody's felt it now, and I think certainly the pandemic shone a big light on having to furlough a lot of staff, but construction, we stopped working for maybe 6 weeks ish, I think, if we think about it. And then we went back to work, but maybe not at full capacity. But it's made a lot of people reflect. So Alison touched on there, we've got quite a high percentage, maybe 20-25% of the operational workforce that are over 50. So you've got a lot of experience, a lot of skills there. But also, we found each month now we've got a couple of people approaching us saying, "Look, we're thinking of retiring, we're thinking of finishing," because depending on their personal circumstances, they can, or certainly they want reduced hours. But what we haven't done as a sector is prep for that. So we've got a good apprenticeship program, and we're ramping that up. But at the same time, the sector as a whole hasn't been able to feed the demand, and now demand's got a lot greater, so everybody's again, there's lots more construction about, there's lots more work about, so everybody's order book, everybody's looking very, very positive. But the knock on is available trades is having that impact now on program. We've got a perfect storm at the minute, because we've got a lack of material availability, a lack of labour availability through specialist contractors and our directly employed staff. And again, that's perhaps we're feeling it early, probably because we do self-deliver quite a lot. So all the work streams, whereas a lot of major contractors will have specialist contractors on the books, we self-deliver a lot. So we've started to see those members of staff who are retiring and finishing. You wish them well, but then you're going, all right, it's going to take us another couple of years before we can cook a new apprentice so that they're ready.
Yeah, and I know the YouGov did a poll in October, actually, where they were interviewing people who were ages 18 and up, and construction was the least popular profession. In fact, 79% said they would not even consider it as an employment choice, which is like a bit of a shocking stat to see. Why do you guys think that is?
I think there's a stigma attached to construction that's an age-old stigma, but also I think there's also some work to be done to try and showcase what the construction industry is about, because obviously it's not just about trade apprenticeships and trade roles. There's quite a lot of professional technical roles that can be moved into in the construction industry that maybe people don't really know a lot about. And you've obviously got QSs, surveyors, architects, all these other technical roles which require a high level of academic type approach. I think there's definitely work to be done in showcasing the construction industry and what it's all about. Because ultimately it's buoyant at the moment, and that's why we're feeling some of the pressures of being able to attract people, but also being able to retain people as well, because the industry can be quite cutthroat, and people will move around to suit their own personal circumstances. So trying to get that longevity is also a problem.
I think John's picked up on a thing in terms of people want to be more transient, isn't it? In your perhaps our parents' generation, when they got a job and you got a job for life, isn't it? And that was it. And you kind of got frowned upon if you moved from place to place. Whereas I think the younger population is probably a lot more transient. They're quite happy to go from place to place because they're looking perhaps for different things. And I think John's right in terms of there's some very professional and technically competent people out there that it takes quite a lot of time, effort and dedication, doesn't it, to get some of these qualifications, whether you're a quantity surveyor or a gas engineer out there. It does take time to get those qualifications. And I think some of the thing is on construction sometimes can be very cold. It's all right in the summer, isn't it, when it's nice weather like this and the sun's out. But again, you've got to think of it's not always nice weather. And also there's new technologies coming through, certainly in John's area, isn't there, John, in terms of materials and things which require a different skill set than perhaps we've needed in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think construction's at the forefront of innovation, and also the requirements that the governments are imposing in relation to more green agendas and that type of initiatives moving forward. It's a hotbed for innovation, and obviously people, if you stop and think about what it involves, it can be really sort of a forward-thinking industry, and it needs forward-thinking people to get on board and join that and assist that growth and that development.
To go back to the stigma thing, I think, there's this thought process that everyone who's like younger, they're really, we do know that the younger population is very climate sensitive and is very concerned with sustainability and protecting the world and the planet. Construction has a lot of ways you can be part of that movement too, doesn't it?
Yeah, picking up from a maintenance point of view, we're looking at making the most out of the assets that we've got. So everything is about this building's been there, and if we can make that building last in the most efficient manner and actually improve its environmental impact, or the environmental impact it has on the community, then that's what we will try and do. So we're looking to maintain and improve the properties that we've got. And we'll do that through a variety of ways, getting materials that have got longer lifestyle than they've perhaps had in the past. We're using paints, for example, that instead of it, perhaps a few years ago, you may have painted a property every 3 years, we can now paint it every 7 years. So there's things certainly on the materials types of things that we're looking at that will have a positive environmental impact to how we deal with waste and some of our supply chain partners. So certainly in the maintenance side of things that we're doing things, and again that will lead in from the stuff, keep picking on John, but what John does is the kind of the front end of stuff, but he's producing things which we will then need to maintain in a later life. So the more kind of environmentally efficient and effective way that he can deliver at the front end means that we can maintain that at the back end, and all those different technologies is again providing a step ladder into different things, because John's putting it in the new build.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Alison. I mean, obviously the materials are a big part of everything we do, but it's also how do we go about building things in the most efficient way possible as well. How we reduce inefficiency on site, how we get things moving and built in the quickest, safest, and most efficient possible way. So there's a big approach to how we do things in a more efficient, more green sort of methodology, but it's the full sort of cradle to grave elements, and you've got to start planning that thing very early on to make sure that you have a plan to deal with all these issues and make sure that everybody's bought into that plan, and you can then realise it both on site and in terms of delivery and future maintenance, as Alison touches on.
Paul, you went to that thing that other week back with the recycling and the windows and the plastic windows. I mean, that was an interesting fact in itself,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
regionally, and I think it's keeping up. I mean, we were lucky enough because of the birthday. Steve Rotherham came and visited us this week. So again, and part of the discussions that he was having with some of the apprentices there were about the opportunities that will come in across the Northwest and the next 15, 20 years around material recycling, trying to use products that are local. Glass was a big one about the embedded carbon that's in there, and getting the most out of those natural resources that we've got locally. So I do think that the whole green agenda is the next big thing that I think everybody's focused on. Where we know that this net zero strategy that everybody's developing is still a little bit, I would say, early days for everybody, because the technology isn't quite there. But we've got to start somewhere, and we've got to start investing and training everybody in and moving in that direction.
Paul hits the nail on the head there, that there is no one obvious replacement technology for some of the things that are currently being used. So there's a lot in the press at the moment, about just domestic gas boilers and what they will be replaced with. And I think if there was an easy answer, everybody'd know what we're doing. So as Paul says, we're on the cusp of, right, there's a number of technologies and what's going to be the most prevalent way forward for us all. So there's a lot to look forward to in finding those solutions, but they're not quite there yet.
It seems like there is an awful lot of work to be done, and we need people to do it. So, keeping that in mind, the latest report from the Office of National Statistics said that 2.8% of jobs in construction were actually vacant. Now, that doesn't actually sound so bad because 2.8% is like a relatively small number, but then you realize that that's 35,000 jobs. That's more than the population of some of the smaller Manchester towns. It's crazy to think that there's an entire town's worth of jobs that aren't being done. So, how do we train people to fill these positions?
I mean, our strategy, and probably mirroring other organisations up and down the country, is apprentices are the key. So, and I think that's, and we don't necessarily mean school leavers. Again, we've been honing that over the last couple of years, where we've ramped up. COVID aside, because we didn't do anything in that 12 months, which we regret now, because I think on reflection we should have done something that year, but we paused everything during that year. But we're really ramping up those numbers. But we've been having a dialogue there about both school leavers, because we're planning on, certainly this year we've got a live apprenticeship intake now, and that'll probably be taking another 20 into the business in this next round. But older apprentices, so you mature apprentices, so we've a number of those already, so they're not school leavers. I know we've got a joiner who's a mother of two, who joined us, I think, March, or it might have been the year before, who were really good advocates for further recruitment. So we've been able to draw on their experience to get others into the business whenever we do this recruitment drive. But I certainly think that's what other businesses similar to ours need to do, is to increase that number. But 35,000 people trying to recruit into that each year, and that's probably assuming that those demands are going to stay the same. What we're saying is actually we're going to see a higher number of people retire, so that vacancy list is only going to get bigger. So it is a genuine, real issue.
And I think there's, well, isn't it? We're trying to do a few things that are not just about the apprenticeships, because that implies that you know which route you want to go down. So HMS has been involved with a host of things that give people tasters of the organisation. So we've got some women in construction courses. We've got some other ones that we call ILMs, which give a kind of a 6-month taster, which they get to go around the business. So they get to go into the maintenance side, they get to go in the construction side. We've been using, there's a young apprentice at the minute called Molly, who we've been using as quite a good kind of case study as to, she not got a Scooby-Doo that she wanted to go into maintenance, construction, or anything else like that, but just happened to come across a kind of an opportunity to come into the organisation, which she took. So she was with us initially for a 6-month period. She went round the organisation trying out different types of trades, and as a consequence of that, she applied for an apprenticeship fairly recently. Again, couldn't decide necessarily whether she wanted to do plumbing or electrical work, but she's decided that she wants to look at both, but she's currently on with an electrician at the minute. So they're some quite good things to give people just a taster to see whether they like it or not, rather than necessarily embarking on an apprenticeship to start off with.
I think to add to Alison's point, that we talk a lot about apprentices being trade-based and workmanlike. Obviously, there's professional apprenticeships as well. We have a number of quantity surveyors who we've got down as professional apprentices going through degree courses whilst working for us. And I think, investing in them early on, but not just while they're doing the degree, but also, as Paul alludes to about the age thing, is about giving them a range of opportunities to broaden their skills and experience while they're with us. So as we've said, HMS has grown, has diversified, and that's good for the staff, so they can have other opportunities to broaden their horizon, but to stay with us and have stable employment. So some of our graduates who've come through have taken on bigger and greater responsibilities while staying with us, and that's been a real success about promoting from within.
I imagine people are also really interested in diversifying their skills. Have you found a lot of people who are fascinated by the apprenticeship program?
Yeah, well, we touched on a little bit before about what we've done. Certainly, the last round, we were able to utilise the pre-apprenticeship program that we did, and we made sure that, fortunate because we'd probably done a recruitment for that pre-apprenticeship program, or the foundation had done on our behalf. We offered everybody who was on that program an apprenticeship. We doubled the numbers in the end, recognising that demand was increasing. So again, we've got a program that's just started now as part of this government's Kickstart initiative. So again, we've got 15 green space staff who've started across the business, where hopefully we'll be given all of those opportunities once that traineeship's finished, because that's given them an introduction into the world of work. So I do think, yes, we will get interest and continue over the next couple of years. The issue will be, it's going to take us really 3 or 4 years in order to ramp those numbers up and keep our operational staff numbers at where we want them to be, with the rate at which the others are leaving the business. That's the difficulty now, because demand is outstripping the available labour resource that we've got. So for the short term, it's definitely we're going to feel the pinch.
And having those apprenticeships as well enables us to tap into the kind of knowledge and technical expertise we've got in our existing workplace. So those people that are perhaps looking to retire have an awful lot of knowledge, and it's not just these apprentices go off to college for a day or so. They're they're buddied up with somebody for periods of time who are sharing that kind of technical knowledge and attitude as well, isn't it? It's not just about the technical skill, it's the people skill. Certainly, again, in the maintenance side of things, you can be going into people's homes, and some people whose homes you're going into are living sometimes a very chaotic lifestyle. You do need to have some empathy and some understanding, so it's not just your technical competency about being able to solve why the electric lights aren't working. It's also being able to sometimes do that with compassion and understanding and sympathy.
That old adage never changed, was it? Recruit for attitude, train for skills. And I think because we're a people-based business, that's never really gone away, even though we're looking at different technical skills and technical abilities that we're looking for in people. At the heart of what we're looking for, you've got to actually recognise the customer base that we're working with, and that we're a community organisation at heart.
So it does seem like, in y'all's opinion, that apprenticeships is really the way forward to addressing the skills shortage that we're facing right now. Would you guys say that's accurate, or are there other things we could be doing as an industry as well?
I mean, retaining people is really important as well. That retention element. I mean, obviously people come to retirement age and leave the business, but also it's making people enjoy what they do and be part of the journey. And if we can retain people and stop them from going elsewhere, that's the key thing. But also, I know people who've left the industry altogether, due to being disillusioned. Usually, when we have an issue such as the pandemic, construction is the first thing to get hit. But fortunately, construction continued. But if I think back to 2008 when the recession hit, I know people who left to go taxi driving and never come back. And it is about that retention and that making sure people can see a future in construction. And I think we've all got a part to play in that.
Okay, so when it comes to the status of talent in the industry, are we optimistic? Are we cautious? Or do we just feel like we're in a really bad situation? Help me out. Are we green light, yellow light, or red?
I'm an optimist, so I think there's people out there, but we've just got to find them, or they've got to find us.
I think we've got a short-term problem. I do. I think the next couple of years, and for the benefit of the industry, because I think once something gets under pressure, somebody does something about it. So hopefully this period, this year and next year, will force a lot of companies, including these government programs, to ramp up the number of people that's in the industry. So again, we'll have a real period over the next 2 or 3 years of lots more new entrants joining the industry. That then but that's going to take 2 or 3 years for those staff to be trained, for them to be operating in the marketplace. So during this period, you probably will get lots of challenge, lots of increased costs because everybody will be fighting for labour across the board. So we've got a short-term issue, but I think for the long-term benefit of the industry.
I think I'd add to that, but maybe just taking a different angle. I'm optimistic, but more so because of the actual demands in the market. Affordable housing remains a key priority for this country. So the demand to replace old and redundant stock, as it were, but people's aspirations to have their own house and the likes, but to be able to find something that's affordable remains a key driver. So that gives us but it doesn't guarantee us a pipeline, but it certainly shows us strength of certainty that there is that opportunity there that will continue, and therefore we can afford to invest.
Even though there's a short-term hurdle, I'm optimistic about the future. I think everybody realises there's work to be done, and it's an industry-wide thing. And I think people put the effort into to change the dynamics. But there is a short-term hurdle we do have to get on.
I was going to say, I'm still passionate about the sector. I'm still passionate about, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there that are probably the same. It's about sharing that passion, and hopefully sometimes people might hear this and think, well, actually, it doesn't sound too bad. I'll give it a go.
If I try and think about the briefings we get a couple of times a week by the number of staff, I mean, we've nearly 300 staff who are operating in people's homes every day, and the practical stuff that comes through about somebody saving somebody's life, somebody doing, it's something that's so real, like where you're saying that made a real difference. There was one last week where somebody'd saved somebody's life, like they'd been in the house while they were working and they had a heart attack.
And that's been quite common, hasn't it, over the last couple
Yeah.
of months? How many of them have we had? We've had quite a few, haven't we? Not only just saving them in the house, saving them on the street.
Yeah, but it's different. It's drawing. If you can get people to recognise that they can make an impact.
Well, I can think of no better way to end this podcast than with that message of just make an impact. And the fact that you guys are so optimistic about this issue, which is absolutely fantastic. It's always nice to end things where people are like, yes, I believe in the future. So I just want to thank you guys so much again for joining us here at the Place Northwest podcast. Paul, John, Ian, and Alison, y'all have been amazing. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've learned a few new things. I know I have. If you liked the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. Once again, I'm Julia Hatmaker. Thank you so much for listening and have a good rest of your day.